Thank you. I'm lucky because Simon Chaplin mentioned this project in his introduction this morning, so he gave a brief introduction to the UK Medical Heritage Library project. He also said that he regretted not having started with a low-hanging fruit like a project of this type would have been. And so we kind of feel a little bit of pressure here, because if we fail in the low-hanging fruit, then it means that we are the real idiots here. But hopefully we won't fail. There's no sign we will. So what is the project? It's a partnership between Jisc and the Wellcome Library, and we're working very closely with the Internet Archive. And it's a project that is delivering a fair amount of what we would perhaps refer to a critical mass of medical knowledge by digitizing about 15 million pages of books and pamphlets focusing on the 19th century. For us, it's a good way of looking at potentially a new model for working in digitization through an approach that has sustainability built into it from the very beginning, and also a new way of working with the contributing institutions, and I'll say a few words about it in a moment. And also making sure that academic requirements and the requirements of users are, again, factored in from the very beginning of the project. And in terms of critical mass, of course, this project builds on a US-based project, the original Medical Heritage Library, that started digitizing medical books a few years back, and which, of course, are all on the Internet Archive. So just to give you a bit of context in terms of how this fits in within the Jisc activity in content. You will know, I think most of you will know about these key areas that are really the areas where Jisc works in terms of content. So there's all the negotiations that Jisc Collection does in terms of access to mainly journals, but also digital collections. There's the area of content procurement, so digitization of national purchases, content delivery. We have a couple of our own delivery services, historical texts and the journal archives, and other related projects that look at use, impact, enhancing discovery. And in a way, this project really touches at least on 3 of these areas. Certainly on the digitization, it links back to our own way of delivering content, because all the books will also be ingested into the historical texts platform. And of course, we will be developing a number of tools and visualizations that my colleague Alex will talk about, which are really aimed at getting people to engage and to discover the content in an easier way. So really, again, this possibly presents this project really a sort of a blueprint for the way that we also want to link up the various activities and services that we have within Jisc. So how does it all work? Jisc and the Wellcome got together 2-3 years ago in this partnership as the main funding partners. I think roughly we've put in about 2 million each. This is from the Jisc side, it was capital funding. And from the Wellcome, of course, we heard again this morning from Simon, it's a bit easier for them to get money from the board, but so about the same amount. The Internet Archive was selected as the digitization agency through a proper procurement process that the Wellcome underwent, and is doing all the digitization from, they've set up basically a digitization shop at the Wellcome in Houston. And all the books are being uploaded on the Internet Archive first. They're then harvested by the Wellcome and delivered through the Wellcome Library. And then we are also taking the records from the Wellcome and putting them into our historical text. And for Jisc, it's a very important step. This in the sense that by ingesting the medical books, we also inaugurate in a way that an open access section of the historical texts service, which of course at the moment it's a service that delivers content behind authentication. And we're working with publishers also to free up some of that metadata of the commercial data sets that are contained in historical texts before the authentication layer kicks in. In terms of governance, we have a project board which is made up by members of the JISC project team, the Welcome team, and the chair of the academic advisory group, Stella. And again, we set up an academic advisory group from the very beginning because we really wanted them to input into the book selections, the collections that were going to be digitized, and also the best ways in which we then wanted to make sure that the content was presented to different users. The funding that JISC provided has gone entirely on supporting higher education institutions or universities in the UK to allow the digitization of their own collections. And the Welcome has then topped that up and allowed also Royal Colleges to be contributing partners and to have the content digitized. And also the JISC funding has gone into the production of the visualizations that Alex will talk about. So this is really a slide I can just really skip. It's more about sort of division of labor. The other interesting thing to mention might be that the Welcome is also managing all the relationships with the 9 contributing institutions and Royal Colleges. They're doing deduplication of records against the existing Internet Archive records, and they're doing all the harvesting from the Internet Archive. And of course, the Internet Archive is doing all the digitization, QA, OCR, and all the liaisons about the logistics of getting the books in and shipping them back with the Welcome. So from our point of view, I think in terms of the benefits of this partnership, it's very much about potentially having offered a new model for the way in which JISC might work on digitization in the future. A model which involves a number of content providers and institutions that offer their collections, but around a very specific theme, almost as a kind of in a consortium type of approach. Of course, the pooling of finances, that was really important in terms of driving down costs and achieving economies of scale. So I think we brought down the digitization costs per page of quite a lot, even from initial forecasts that we had made. And of course, we are building on existing infrastructure. So we're not creating new websites. Again, Internet Archive, Welcome Library, and of course, from our point of view, historical text, a lot of the developments that we're doing and the visualization tools will then be rolled out on the platform, and therefore the sustainability of this content will really become business as usual for us. And of course, in terms of enhancing discovery, we're really seeing this project as a way of really trying to push discovery as much as possible. Of course, the content is all on open access. There's open licenses. The tools we're creating will be open, and of course there are APIs and various facilities to download the content. So just quickly, this is courtesy of Christy Henshaw at the Welcome. Just briefly to give you an idea where we are. We've kind of halfway through the digitization, and by July we should have reached the target of 15 million pages, about 65,000 books. The usage stats are already really encouraging. We haven't really launched the project, but of course on the Internet Archives there's a lot of visits that come through, a lot of them to do with sex and searches of this kind, but nonetheless there's a lot of visits to the books, and also from the Welcome Library digital library. We've had press coverage in the national press, but really most of our concerns at the moment are, so on the Welcome side, the Welcome Library side, it's about continuing the digitization. And on the Jisc side is really to make sure that now we develop tools for visualizing the content and really to enable researchers and learners and different type of user groups to make sense of these 15 million pages without getting lost. So this is the Visualizing Medical History sub-project within the main UK-MHL Medical Heritage Library. So I'm just going to hand over to Alex now.
So as Paola mentioned, this sort of sub-project, Visualizing Medical History, was commissioned earlier in the summer. The purpose of the project really is twofold. We realized early on that with any kind of mass digitization project like this, the kind of need to interpret that content is paramount, so that it's not just, as Simon was saying earlier this morning, it's not just thrown in this bucket and you kind of hope that people will find things. So this quote on the right, and I won't read it out because I'm guessing you can read, basically identifies that there's two sort of tracks to this going on, that we're visualizing to show the artifacts, off in a way, and the fact that these are physical artifacts and putting them in this new digital sphere but not losing that physicality. But also these visualizations will enable new forms of scholarship which hitherto weren't possible. The digital humanities is what I'm talking about there. And so those kind of two areas were sort of flowed through the procurement process when we were tendering, and the suppliers that we picked, and the project as it's gone on. So we commissioned the project to a consortium of consultants, Knowledge Integration, CERO, and GUI, who all have various different expertise. So GUI are the visual sort of side to it, for example. And they're also working with King's College London for academic input from the Medical History Department. And they're guided by our academic advisory group, of which Stella is the chair. And early in the project, we held a workshop, which was a user requirements gathering to try and identify the different use cases for the UK Medical Heritage Library. And we came up with these, that workshop was attended by the academic advisory group. It was academics, museum professionals, teachers, and it was really useful. And we identified these three broad groups of novice users, experienced users, and domain experts. So novice users may be sort of first-year undergraduates who are used to perhaps finding everything on Google, FE students and the general public. Experienced users may be academics in related fields, because one of the great things about this collection is, although it's a medical heritage library, it actually spans a lot of associated fields. Maybe postgraduates, researchers, journalists, that kind of thing. And then the domain experts, medical historians, doctoral students, people who really know the subject. We need to provide visualizations that meet the needs of all of these. So we started, and this is all work in progress. We're at the stage where we're developing these visualizations in terms of sort of theoretically developing them. They won't actually be produced in the historical text platform until next year, but these are to try and meet those requirements. So the first group, novice users, and we had a couple of visualizations in mind for them. So one was the wall of images, which is, here's an example from Flickr, and this is actually the US Medical Heritage Library that Paola mentioned. They automatically extract images from the books and then deposit them on Flickr, which has a lot of challenges, because telling a computer to identify what an image is, as I'm sure you're all aware, is quite challenging. But there are ways that we can do that. And this gives a really good contextual overview of what's in there, and people can just browse through. The other was a histogram, which allows a user to quickly see the spread of the corpus over time. Now the histogram will actually, and some of these will appeal to different groups, not just novices, but if a user was just visiting the collection for the first time and didn't really know what time period it covered, they could see it there. We also have the body part viewer, which is proposed here, whereby someone a real novice user may just click on the head, for example, and be brought results relating to conditions of the head or the brain, perhaps. This one is proving quite challenging because of the complexities of the sort of linking a body part to the texts. But it is something we're quite keen on because it's very visual and it's very medical, and I think from a marketing point of view, it would be very good for the project as well. The word cloud, I'm sure you all know what they are, but great for novice users, gives a quick overview, and you can refine the search by clicking on a word and another word cloud will come up, so kind of like a taxonomy. Then experienced users, we have the Ngram. This is an example from Google Books, I believe. And so this is a bit more experienced because it shows that you could trace the change in terminology over time in the corpus. So here the example is depression versus melancholia. So you do require some medical knowledge, or you may want to look at smoking, cancer, that kind of thing. And again, the histogram would be of interest to experienced users as well, particularly if they, as you can see there, you can refine the histogram over a smaller period of time if you're only looking at, say, a decade. And then we have the collections graph. The example here is a bubble graph, which basically quickly shows the collection in its broad subject thematic areas. You would have to understand what the terms were, therefore it's more of an experienced user group, and the word cloud again. And then for expert users, the word cloud once more, because an expert user may be looking for a particular term, they may see it in the word cloud and then refine further. We're also looking at mapping hospitals and medical institutions that are mentioned in the text in the corpus. This is going to be quite challenging, particularly as institutions often change name or don't exist anymore. But it was one that was felt would be very useful by the academic advisory group, and would also, this example here is from the team that won the project, was an example that they'd worked on, and they referenced it. So, and again, the Ngram, the final one for the expert users, requires some medical knowledge. So you can see that we're meeting the needs of these different groups. The word cloud meets the needs potentially of all of them, and then others are said in the body part view, the wall of images, more for novice users. But it's really important for us to meet those different user requirements. So the next step in the project, as I said, this project is still going on until July 2016. We are refining these requirements, and then we'll start developing the visualizations and testing with users. We'll go back to the academic advisory group for their input, but we're also going to test it with students and different users just to see how they react to it. And then it will become, these visualizations will be part of Jisc's historical text platform by July 2016. Some of the visualizations will actually be applied across historical text because there's already a number of collections in there, including early English books online. Others will be specific to the medical books, like the body part viewer. And do please keep up to date with the blog. And I'm now going to hand over to Stella.
I'll be quite brief, and really I want to move it from the significance of this for medical historians, although I am a medical historian. But in fact, really the reason I was particularly keen to chair the academic advisory group was because of the significance of this project, I think, for the RLUK powering scholarship strategy. Our strategy, the RLUK strategy, stresses in one strand the importance of meeting the challenge of managing our print collections, our huge print collections across the piece. I've put up there, we have a huge challenge in managing 19th and 20th century print collections, where we've got high volume, low use. They're taking up enormous amounts of space. How do we get best value out of those for the sector, for the general public? And how does digitisation fit into that? What you need in terms of a shared print stewardship, and I should have in fact put probably they're probably in the wrong order, but one, you need accurate metadata. You need to be able to use that metadata to deduplicate your collections if you're creating one collaborative collection. You then need to be able to share, you need a document delivery or a content delivery system. Digitisation is one form, it's not the only form. In shared collection, shared print collection systems, often document supply is actually cheaper. So one of the reasons I wanted to be involved in this was to see whether digitisation could add some added value. What's the over and above just the content of it? And you've seen some of the exploration that we're doing through Alex's work on, and the work that Zero Consulting and GUI and others are doing on the visualisations. So what are we, what questions were we asking? What lessons were we seeking to learn? Well, can we scale up from 7 libraries? I have to say it's been a fantastic, to me, and I don't do the shipping, nor do I manage the Internet Archive, but from sitting on the sidelines, certainly it looks to me to have been a very slick, very efficient process, even given the complexities of 7 libraries. So can we scale up from there? Will electronic access and or digitisation add value to our collections? And will it increase the use? You've seen the graphs there about the increase interrogation of things like the Wellcome website and Internet Archive. I hope that we'll go a bit further and find out whether it's actually reshaping research questions, whether we're actually learning more, whether in that research cycle digitisation is making a difference. And will libraries release space? That wasn't the purpose of this project, but it will be interesting to see whether libraries actually do release space and how that is done and how successful it is. So that's us. Happy, I'm sure, to take some questions.